A TikTok creator joked that her husband might one day be the subject of a Netflix documentary after she said she'd discovered something about him that could end his career. Less than 2 weeks later, she was shot and killed inside her own home. Just after 11:15 p.m., emergency dispatchers received 2 calls in quick succession. The first, a woman's voice in clear distress. The second, a child saying his stepfather had hurt his mother. Sara Gilson was 43 years old, living in Owasso, Oklahoma, a suburb just north of Tulsa. By day, she worked as a hairstylist. Behind the chair, she built relationships that, by nearly every account, went far beyond a haircut. Clients would later describe her not just as someone who did their hair, but as a genuine friend. Online, she went by the same name, Sara Gilson, building a following of tens of thousands on TikTok, where she sold clothing and jewelry alongside glimpses of her everyday life. She was raising 2 teenage children from a previous relationship. The man in her life was her husband, Jeremiah Sean Duffy, 48, known to most people simply as Sean. By the summer of 2026, their marriage was ending. Sara and Sean were estranged, living apart, with a divorce already underway. Outside the marriage, Duffy had another role in the community. He coached a traveling, competitive youth basketball team, one that, for years, had been trusted with other people's daughters. To her followers, Sara came across as warm, funny, and open about her life, the kind of creator people felt like they actually knew. This is Sara Gilson before any of it made headlines. That evening, at an elementary school in Owasso, Duffy was accused of inappropriately touching a girl on the traveling team he coached. According to the Owasso Police Department, the incident was witnessed by another coach on the team, who intervened immediately and reported it to the girl's parent. Within about an hour, the girl and her parent arrived at Owasso Police Headquarters to report what had happened. According to investigators, similar conduct involving the same child had reportedly occurred previously across multiple law enforcement jurisdictions in multiple states. That night, according to police, Duffy fled the scene. He was not seen again by Owasso Police. Police contacted Duffy's wife, Sara Gilson, and provided information on how to seek an emergency protective order. The next day, June 10th, she did exactly that. She told the court she feared for her safety and described behavior she believed posed an immediate risk. These were allegations made in a civil court filing, not findings from a criminal trial, and they were never tested in criminal court before his death. But regardless of how those allegations might ultimately have been resolved, one fact is undisputed. Sara believed she needed legal protection. The court granted the emergency protective order. On the very same day, another protective order petition was filed, this one on behalf of the 15-year-old girl involved in the school incident. Those allegations remained allegations contained in court records. As a result, they were never examined in a criminal trial. There was one more legal complication, and it's arguably the single most important fact in understanding everything that followed. Under U.S. law, crimes that occur on tribal land are treated differently depending on who is involved, because Duffy is a member of the Osage Nation, and the reported offense occurred on land legally classified as Indian country. The case didn't fall under Owasso's local criminal code at all, it fell under a separate federal one. Under the Federal Major Crimes Act, that meant the matter moved from the local courthouse to the U.S. Attorney's Office, a system with its own investigators, its own timeline, and no obligation to update the public or the local police department on its progress. That's the reason no arrest ever followed the original allegation, not because no one acted, but because the case had shifted into a different legal system entirely, one that doesn't move at the pace of a local court. For anyone watching from the outside, this created a dangerous gap. A man accused of severe crimes was walking free while the legal system quietly ground on behind closed doors. By the end of June, there were 2 active protective orders, both involved the same man, and jurisdiction over the criminal investigation had already passed to federal authorities, while the man named in both orders remained unseen by local police. So what happened during those final weeks? The answer begins on July 11th, when Sara opened TikTok. July 11th, 2026, Sara Gilson uploaded a short TikTok that followed a trend popular on the platform at the time. The format was familiar. Users would jokingly pretend they were preparing for a future Netflix documentary about a dramatic event in their lives. Sara's version ended with a reference to her soon-to-be ex-husband. Without going into detail, she suggested it was the kind of discovery a documentary might one day cover. Her caption read simply, "I wish I was joking." She didn't explain what had happened, she didn't present evidence. The clip lasted only a few seconds. Within 2 weeks, it had been viewed more than 6 million times, reaching far beyond her existing followers and into an audience who had never heard her name before. At the time, many viewers saw it as just another trending TikTok. But for those who knew about the court filings, it carried a very different context. As the video spread, so did the speculation. Some viewers interpreted it as a warning, others saw it as a public statement made during an intensely personal dispute. Online, people began debating what Sara intended the video to mean, but those were public interpretations, not conclusions reached by investigators. As of this recording, authorities have not publicly stated that the TikTok played any role in what happened 12 days later. What we do know is straightforward. On July 11th, Sara posted the video. 12 days later, police responded to a 911 call at her home. What happened between those two dates would soon become the focus of investigators. That evening, dispatchers first received a 911 call during which they reportedly heard a woman screaming, followed by what sounded like a gunshot. Moments later, a juvenile called again from a nearby neighbor's home. Officers were immediately sent to the Gilson home. When officers arrived, they found Sara Gilson dead from gunshot wounds. According to law enforcement, Sara's estranged husband was also found dead at the scene. Investigators say he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The deaths immediately transformed what had begun as an effort to seek legal protection into a homicide investigation. And it left a devastating question hanging over the entire community. If the protective order was in place, why didn't it stop him? The answer is a harsh reality of the legal system. A protective order is a piece of paper. It is a legal command, not a physical barrier. Since fleeing in June, Jeremiah Duffy had remained out of local police sight. While the order was active on paper, it could not lock a door against a man who chose to violate it. On July 23rd, he did just that. Investigators secured the home, documented the scene, and collected evidence as they worked to establish the sequence of events. In the hours that followed, Owasso Police Captain Nick Boatman confirmed the investigation was far from finished, describing it as a multi-scene case. Detectives working several locations at once, interviewing neighbors, and reviewing surveillance footage from the surrounding area. In the hours that followed, authorities released only limited information. Many of the questions circulating online remained unanswered. Investigators did not immediately explain what had happened inside the home, nor did they publicly identify a motive. As news of the shooting spread, attention quickly returned to the TikTok Sara had posted less than 2 weeks earlier. The clip was shared across social media once again. This time, people weren't watching it as part of a trend. They were watching it in the aftermath of a tragedy. Within days, millions of people had seen the video. Countless posts attempted to explain what had happened. While investigators continued documenting the evidence, millions of people were trying to do the same thing from behind their screens. Very quickly, a single video became the center of the public conversation. The clip became significant largely because people watched it after learning how the story ended. Knowing the outcome can change the way we interpret everything that came before. That doesn't mean the warning signs weren't real. The protective order filings were real. The court hearings were real. The legal process was real. But it's important to distinguish documented events from the meanings people later attached to them. In the days after her death, people who knew Sara began speaking publicly. Her niece, Colby Manry, described her as someone who lit up every room she walked into. The father of her 2 teenage children, Lyle Landers, said simply that his kids woke up that morning without their mother. In the weeks since, a fundraiser was set up to support Sara's 2 children. None of that made headlines the way the TikTok did, but it's part of the story too. She reported it. She was granted protective orders. She even left a public warning, seen by millions. Federal law, local police, court filings, every step that was supposed to happen, happened. And still, on July 23rd, the worst outcome did. Long after the headlines fade, this case will continue to raise difficult questions. Public court records show that, weeks before the shooting, Sara Gilson sought legal protection. Those records also show that another family sought protection involving the same man. The protective orders were granted. Later, they were extended. And yet, on July 23rd, Sara Gilson was dead. Everything beyond that timeline becomes far more complicated. Could more have been done? Would a criminal investigation have changed the outcome? Could anyone have recognized the danger sooner? Those are questions many people have asked, but based on the publicly available information, they are questions without definitive answers. Perhaps that's why so many people focused on the TikTok. A short video is easier to understand than months of court filings. It's easier to share, easier to remember, and easier to turn into a story. But this case didn't begin with a viral post. It began with legal documents, court hearings, protective orders, and a woman who turned to the legal system because she believed she needed protection. The TikTok became the most widely recognized part of this story, but it was never the whole story. As of this recording, investigators have not publicly concluded that the video played any role in what happened on July 23rd. The investigation remains ongoing, and authorities have not yet released their final findings. The federal case involving the teenager didn't end with his death. It's still sitting with the U.S. Attorney's Office, moving through a process with no public deadline. The internet has tried to explain why. Those are not always the same thing. Perhaps the most important lesson this case leaves behind is the importance of separating documented fact from public interpretation, because once those two become blurred, understanding what really happened becomes even harder. When the headlines fade and the cameras move on, what's left behind is simpler than any theory. Two children growing up without their mother,